The courtroom feels like a pressure cooker, the silence thick enough to slice through. Kiana stands frozen in the witness box, her pulse racing in her ears. Every breath she takes feels like it could be her last. One wrong move, one crack in, her composure, and the truth could slip away like sand through her fingers. The judge's gavel is still ringing in the air, a final note to what has been an endless trial. She looks around, searching the faces of the jury, the spectators, and Officer Coleman sitting across from her. His cold stare bores into her, and, in that moment, she feels the crushing weight of a system built to break her. Her words, her entire fight are hanging in the balance. Will they see the truth, or will they buy into his lies? Kiana's throat tightens, but her resolve hardens. She can't back down now. Not when everything is on the line. Kiana, to herself, with fierce determination, I'm not invisible. I will make them listen. Her eyes flick to Officer Coleman sitting across the courtroom. The smug look on his face makes her stomach churn, but she holds her gaze steady. He doesn't get to see her tremble. Not today. The prosecutor stands to begin the questioning, but Kiana barely hears the words. Her mind is elsewhere, on the events that led her here. Kiana, voice quivering slightly. On that night, I wasn't the one breaking the law. I was just helping a friend. But that didn't matter to him. She feels the sting of the memory rise. Coleman, his knee on her back, his breath hot on her neck as he shoved her to the ground. Her arm snapped, and she heard the crunch like it was her soul breaking. Kiana looks down at the bruises on her wrist, still visible, despite the makeup. A reminder of how much she has endured to even get to this point. Her words tremble at first, but gain strength. She pushes through, speaking louder, more firmly. She has to, Kiana. They told me I was resisting. They said I was violent. But I wasn't. I wasn't. Her voice catches, the raw pain slipping through the cracks of her control. Kiana, gaining composure. He never asked for my side of the story. He never cared to listen. She pauses, feeling the silent presence of the courtroom, all eyes on her, and then she pushes forward again, the words coming quicker now. Kiana, Officer Coleman didn't just hurt me. He hurt all of us. He took away the right to just exist in peace. And I'm tired of being treated like my life doesn't matter. I'm tired of being judged based on nothing but the color of my skin. Her eyes dart around the room, scanning the faces of the jury, the judge, and the spectators. She knows some of them are already ready to dismiss her, to pretend she's just another angry black woman. But she isn't going to let that happen. She won't. The defense attorney, a middle-aged man with slick hair, stands up and interrupts, his voice dripping with condescension. Defense attorney, Ms. Lawson, you're claiming your rights were violated, but were you complying with the officer's orders? Kiana's face hardens, but she doesn't back down. The room grows colder, her frustration rising. Kiana, complying? Or being crushed under the weight of someone else's power? How does compliance look when you're already being beaten down? She feels the sting of her own words, but she refuses to look away. The defense attorney glares at her, sneering as if her words don't matter. He doesn't get it. None of them do. The judge looks between them but says nothing. His silence another form of dismissal. Kiana's heart races. She feels herself slipping into doubt. She wants to be heard, but her voice feels small in this space. Kiana whispers to herself, "Is it even enough?" But then she remembers the faces of her community, those who had watched her suffer and hoped she'd be strong enough to fight back. They are all counting on her now. Her hands tighten into fists, the nails digging into her palms. The court is cold, but Kiana's heart burns with a fire that won't be extinguished. She stands taller now, her shoulders square, her chin lifted. Kiana, louder, more resolute. This isn't just about me. This is about every person who has ever been pushed aside, silenced, ignored. This is about the thousands who've lived through the same thing, the ones who didn't make it this far. I'm here to make sure they're not forgotten. I'm here to make sure this stops. There's a shift in the courtroom. Whispers flutter through the audience, uncomfortable, uncertain. Even the prosecutor seems caught off guard by the weight of her words. But Coleman, he doesn't flinch. He keeps his eyes on her as if daring her to keep going. His smirk remains. The system is still on his side. But Kiana's no longer afraid of him. She's not afraid of any of them. Kiana, you can't bury the truth. Not today, not anymore. She lets her words settle in the air between them. The defense attorney opens, his mouth to say something, but Kiana cuts him off with one sharp motion of her hand. Kiana, do what you need to do. You can keep trying to silence me, but I'm here to stay. I'm here to make them listen. Her words hang in the air, charged with defiance and hope. The courtroom feels different now, as if her voice is rising higher than the walls around. Them. Her story, her pain. It is too big to ignore. She stands there, strong, a monument of resilience in a place that was designed to crush her. For a moment, everything seems to stop. Then, slowly, a ripple of movement. A few murmurs from the spectators. A couple of jurors shift in their seats, and then it's Coleman. The power in his stance falters. His shoulders slump just a little. His smirk fades. For the first time in the entire trial, something shifts inside him. He looks away. Kiana watches. Him, knowing that whatever happens next, this is hers. Her truth, her fight. And no one, not even the system that tried to bury her, can take that away. Kiana, quietly but with finality, you can't take my voice. You can't take my truth. The judge brings his gavel down, but the sound echoes differently now. The court feels like it's holding its breath. Kiana's victory is not yet official, but she's already won something far greater. She's reclaimed herself, and that, in the end, is what matters most. The room grows still, the tension hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. Kiana holds her ground, not just for herself, but for everyone who's ever been forced to fight for their right. To Floyd Mayweather and Gervonta "Tank" Davis were once a dynamic duo in the world of boxing. Mayweather, one of the greatest boxers of all time, took Davis under his wing as a mentor, guiding him to multiple world titles and helping him rise to stardom. However, despite their close relationship and shared history in the sport, their bond eventually soured, leading to a very public fallout. The animosity between the two was reignited in recent months, particularly after Davis made some shocking revelations during an interview with Jay Hill. In the interview, Davis opened up about the challenges he faced while under Mayweather's guidance, claiming that there were several instances where he felt he was being put in a lose-lose situation. One of the most significant moments Davis pointed to was his first world title fight against Jose Pedraza. At the time, Davis was 16-0 and only 21 years old. He hadn't fought in nearly 8 months and was struggling financially, earning just $10,000 per fight. Despite these circumstances, Mayweather and his team told Davis that he had to fight Pedraza or risk being shelved and his career potentially stalling. Davis recalled the pressure of being in such a position. He was facing a tough opponent for his world title debut without the proper preparation and financial stability. To make matters worse, he was also dealing with personal issues, including being evicted from his home and having to sell his car. Davis expressed that he felt as though Mayweather intentionally put him in a difficult spot to teach him a lesson, or perhaps to control him. The fighter revealed that he learned how others in the boxing world can manipulate a fighter's situation to keep them dependent on their help, providing just enough to make sure they keep coming back for more. In response to Davis's comments, Mayweather strongly denied any ill intentions and pushed back against the notion that he was trying to sabotage Davis's career. According to Mayweather, he had always supported Davis from day one and had a clear plan to help him become a world champion. Mayweather claimed that he guided Davis through difficult situations and gave him the opportunity to fight for titles, which ultimately helped him achieve success. However, Mayweather also expressed disappointment that Davis had chosen to publicly criticize him despite all the help he had provided. Mayweather stated that he had always been there for Davis, pushing him to be great and constantly supporting him in the public eye. He accused Davis of being ungrateful and failing to understand the bigger picture behind their relationship. According to Mayweather, he had a plan for Davis to succeed in the long term, but Davis's focus on immediate financial rewards, such as the low pay for his early fights, clouded his understanding of the bigger picture. Mayweather argued that it was the nature of the sport that fighters start with low pay, but they eventually earn more as they progress in their careers. Despite this, Mayweather did not deny that Davis was paid a small amount early in his career, and acknowledged that Davis had to make sacrifices along the way. While Mayweather stood by his decisions and his guidance of Davis, he also revealed his frustration with Davis's recent behavior, especially in the aftermath of their split in 2022. The relationship between the two had grown increasingly tense, and their public feud seemed to reach new heights as both men exchanged insults. Mayweather accused Davis of disrespecting him on multiple occasions, especially on social media, and claimed that he had done nothing but try to help Davis reach the highest level of boxing. Davis, on the other hand, seemed to feel that Mayweather's intentions were self-serving, and that he had been treated poorly, despite all the success they had achieved together. Mayweather also addressed the controversy surrounding Davis's pay, pointing out that Davis had been paid what he was worth at the time. According to Mayweather, there was no way to pay Davis more money when he was still early in his career and hadn't yet established himself as a top-tier fighter. Mayweather mentioned that he had bought Davis a car to help him out financially, but Davis's complaints about his low pay seemed to be a bigger issue for Davis than for Mayweather. The fallout between them was becoming a public spectacle, with both men taking shots at each other in the media. In response to the public tension, Mayweather also offered his opinion on the state of boxing and the next generation of fighters. When asked about the top fighters in the lightweight division, Mayweather praised Davis's power, but emphasized the skills of Shakur Stevenson, whom he regarded as the most skillful boxer in the division. Mayweather compared Stevenson's skills to the legendary Pernell Whitaker, noting that while Stevenson may not be the heaviest puncher, his technical ability was second to none. This statement seemed to be a subtle jab at Davis, who had gained a reputation for his punching power, but was often criticized for his overall boxing technique. As the feud continued to escalate, another surprising twist came when Mayweather was revealed to have been helping Davis's opponent, Frank Martin, ahead of their fight. Martin, who was facing Davis in the ring, admitted that Mayweather had been offering him advice on how to defeat Davis. According to Martin, Mayweather had suggested he run at 2 a.m. to gain a mental edge over Davis, a tactic that had been used by boxing legends like Mike Tyson to get into their opponents' heads. Although Martin acknowledged that this advice was not groundbreaking, he noted that coming from someone like Mayweather, it gave him a unique feeling of confidence. This revelation added fuel to the fire, with Davis responding in the media that he wasn't concerned about Mayweather's advice to Martin. He believed that no amount of advice from Mayweather would be enough to defeat him. Davis ultimately went on to win the fight by an 8th round knockout, further asserting his dominance in the lightweight division. However, the tensions between Davis and Mayweather remained high, with both men continuing to trade barbs in the media. Davis's victory over Martin didn't mark the end of their feud. In interviews after the fight, Davis opened up more about his relationship with Mayweather, admitting that he had surpassed Mayweather's legacy and was now operating at a higher level. Davis pointed out that he was achieving success at a much younger age than Mayweather had, and he felt that his future in boxing was bright without the need for Mayweather's influence. While Davis acknowledged the role Mayweather played in his career, he expressed that he was now in control of his own destiny. Davis also revealed that he had signed a new deal, which he believed would help him reach new heights in his career. The deal reportedly surpassed the value of Mayweather's lucrative 2013 Showtime contract, signaling Davis's growing influence and power in the sport. As Davis continued to make waves in boxing, his feud with Mayweather remained a significant storyline, with fans and analysts closely following the drama between the two. The public fallout between Mayweather and Davis is a stark reminder of the complexities of the mentor-protege relationship in boxing. While Mayweather may have played a significant role in helping Davis rise to prominence, their differing views on how to navigate the boxing world ultimately led to their separation. Davis has proven himself to be one of the top fighters in the sport, but his public criticisms of Mayweather and their ongoing feud suggest that their relationship was not as smooth as it seemed on the surface. As the years go by, it remains to be seen how this rivalry will evolve. Will Mayweather and Davis ever reconcile, or will their differences continue to fuel the drama in the boxing world? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. Both fighters have left an indelible mark on the sport, and their feud is just another chapter in the ever-complicated world of boxing politics. The courtroom had been charged with tension all day, but now the air was thick with something heavier: anger. Officer Coleman, whose earlier arrogance had been the source of his strength, now stood rigid in front of the witness stand, his fists clenched at his sides. His face flushed red, the veins in his neck bulging with the force of his fury. He could no longer contain the rage that had been building throughout the trial. The weight of Kiana's testimony, the truth she spoke so calmly, had started to erode the foundation of his defense. And now that foundation cracked. "You don't know anything about me!" Coleman shouted, his voice rising to a point where it nearly cracked under the strain. His eyes locked onto Kiana, his glare a mix of fury and disbelief. "You think you're going to ruin my life with these lies? Destroy my career, huh? You've been trying to get me back for everything, haven't you? For the things that happened." His breath was hot, his body shaking with the effort to hold on to some semblance of control. The room was silent for a moment, every eye trained on Coleman, anticipating the eruption that was coming. He stepped closer to Kiana, pointing his finger at her with such force it seemed as if he might strike her. "You're nothing but a liar. All of this, everything you've said, is a damn lie." The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Kiana, however, remained seated. She didn't flinch. She didn't cower under the weight of his aggression. Her posture remained upright, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The stillness of her presence in the face of Coleman's outburst was more powerful than anything she could have said. "Is that all you've got?" she asked quietly, her voice cutting through the tension like a sharp knife. Her eyes never left his. Coleman froze. The challenge in her voice was like nothing he had expected. His lips parted as if to speak, but the words were caught in his throat. The room was so quiet, you could hear the sound of Coleman's breathing, harsh and uneven, as he tried to steady himself. He stepped back, shaking his head as if trying to push away the realization that the person in front of him, Kiana, was not the broken, intimidated woman he had hoped to see. No, she was stronger, far stronger than he had imagined. "You're still wrong, Coleman," Kiana continued, her voice steady, unwavering. "You want to call me a liar, but you don't even know the truth of your own actions. You've hurt so many people thinking you could get away with it, but I'm here to make sure you don't." Her words were like fire, but her tone remained composed, and with each word, the room felt the shift. It was as if the power of truth itself had entered that space, and it had no intention of leaving. Coleman's earlier certainty, the smugness with which he had walked into the courtroom, was now fading. The more Kiana stood her ground, the more fragile his defense became. Kiana's resolve wasn't just a quiet form of defiance, it was an act of power, a power that no one in that room could ignore. She wasn't just confronting a man, she was confronting the system that had allowed his actions to flourish unchecked. And in this moment, she was not just surviving, she was thriving. As Coleman raged, Kiana stayed silent, her calmness more eloquent than any argument. Her stillness became a declaration, an unspoken statement that no amount of noise or violence could undo the truth she held. And in this stillness, she found her strength. Minutes passed in what seemed like an eternity. But then, something unexpected happened. Coleman's shoulders slumped, his anger subsiding into something else, something less certain. The tension that had gripped him seemed to dissolve, replaced by an unsettling vulnerability. He stumbled backward, his knees buckling beneath him. For a brief moment it seemed as if he might fall, but his pride fought to keep him upright. He took a deep breath and tried to gather himself, but it was too late. The cracks had already appeared in his armor. His knees gave way. With a harsh gasp, Coleman collapsed to the floor, his body hitting the cold ground with a dull thud. The courtroom erupted into shocked murmurs, but Kiana stood still. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The sight of the once confident officer crumpling to the floor in front of her was enough. In this moment, Kiana's silence became a force unto itself, a reminder that she was no longer the person he had tried to break. Kiana's gaze was steady. There was no satisfaction in her eyes, no gloating. only the quiet understanding that what had just transpired wasn't about her winning. It was about him losing the battle with his own conscience, losing the fight he had waged against the truth. The moment was heavy, and it settled over the room like a weight that no one could escape. She stood there in front of the man who had once believed he could control everything, and in the absence of words, she reclaimed her power. There was no need for words. The power of her presence, her unshakable resolve, and the calm dignity in her silence spoke volumes. Kiana had found her strength, and it was no longer a quiet whisper. It was a roar, heard even in the silence of the courtroom. Kiana's eyes never left Coleman's fallen figure as she stood tall, her resolve unwavering. It was not the anger. That fueled her now, but something far more powerful, the quiet confidence of someone who had come through the fire and emerged unscathed. The battle was not over, but in this moment, Kiana had won. She had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her place. The courtroom was no longer the suffocating place it once was. As the judge issued her ruling, allowing the case to continue, a subtle shift occurred. The walls of the room, which had felt so heavy with years of injustice, seemed to crack just slightly, as though the weight of institutional racism that had filled the space for so long was beginning to lift. There was no physical sign of it, no obvious transformation in the structure of the courtroom itself, but the air had changed. Kiana could feel it in the quiet hum of the room, in the way the people who had been watching the trial seemed to stand, a little straighter, to breathe a little more easily. The oppressive atmosphere that had once stifled the voices of those who sought justice had been challenged. Kiana's courage had planted the first seed of change, and it was starting to sprout. The ripple effect was real, and Kiana could feel it in the air. Her strength was no longer just her own. It was the strength of everyone who had been wronged, everyone who had been made to feel less than. She had ignited a fire, and it was spreading, one person at a time. Her victory wasn't just a personal one, it was a victory for the entire community. Kiana didn't stop walking. She moved with a sense of purpose, with the knowledge that she had already changed the course of her life and the lives of so many others. She was no longer a passive figure in a system that sought to control her. Now, she was a leader. People looked to her for inspiration, for hope. They saw in her the strength to overcome, the resilience to rise above everything that had been thrown her way. As Kiana walked, she saw faces that once looked away, people who had been too scared to act. Now they looked at her with something different in their eyes, respect, admiration, and the recognition that what she had done, they too could do. The message was clear. This was not just about her fight. This was about all of them. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been made to feel small. She was fighting for every person who had been treated unfairly, for every person who had been silenced. And in this fight, she wasn't just winning, she was changing the world around her. And as she stood there, surrounded by the people who had been inspired by her, Kiana realized something. This was only the beginning. Her journey was far from over. The system was still flawed, still built to suppress, to deny. But now more than ever, Kiana knew that change was possible. It was already happening. One person, one act of courage, had set the wheels in motion, and it wasn't going to stop. Kiana's journey wasn't just about a courtroom battle. It was about justice. It was about the power of one person to stand against the tide, to refuse to be bent, to challenge the status quo, and demand that the world be better. She had shown them all that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, the human spirit could rise above. And now she was a beacon for everyone who had ever felt powerless. Her victory was a call to action, for everyone who believed in justice, for everyone who was tired of being silenced. The fight for equality was not over, but Kiana's story had proven something crucial. When people stand up for what is right, change is inevitable, and Kiana's journey was only just beginning. A world that had once tried to silence her. The courtroom felt different now. The once suffocating tension had given way to a new reality. Kiana had shown them all the power of resilience, the strength found in standing firm when the world around you wants to break you. It wasn't just about this moment. It was about everything that had led to it. It was the culmination of years of struggle, of standing in the face of adversity, of being told she wasn't enough and proving them all wrong. And then, slowly, Kiana turned and walked away. Her head held high, her heart strong, her spirit unbroken. The world would no longer look at her as a victim of circumstances. No, she had written her own story. She had become the hero of her own journey, and in doing so, she had changed the narrative for all who came after her.